introduction to the Occupy movement. This is a very exciting. I've been around since the world was black and white, before color was invented, and I've spent most of my life watching the values that I believe in, that I think many of us here believe in, disappearing from public space. So it's wonderful to see them coming back. And it's great to see so many people here today. I'm an economic historian, among other things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are, how things have gotten so bad, and I hope at the end to raise a couple of points of maybe hope and optimism for the future. We have 4 steps here. The rise of the golden age. As I said, I'm a historian. Problems that arose from the golden age, what the French call the glorious 30, that ended in collapse in the 70s. And then the neoliberal era, which I'll try to define a little bit. And then the problems that have been arising with neoliberalism leading to the economic crisis that we're seeing today. First, back to the 1930s, which I grew up thinking was just the norm. We created, out of the economic and political crisis of the 1930s, we created a society that's not quite corporate in America, but was reasonably so, where large labor organizations, big capital, big agriculture got together under the auspices of the government and allocated things so that everybody was reasonably well represented. Reasonably, at least. And this led to a period of fantastic economic growth. It's strange. I mean, there's so many things you hear in the media that are so frustrating. Yesterday, somebody was going on like, oh, of course the only solution to the European problem is austerity. And of course neoliberalism leads to economic growth. No. If you want a period of economic growth, look at the 1947 to 70 period in the United States when we had strong labor unions, expanding systems of social security, expanding voter participation, we were extending civil rights, reasonably good times for workers. That was the period we had the fastest economic growth in American history. Oh well, more social regulation, more growth. And these are, you can always play with facts. I could tell you stories. But it is sometimes a little frustrating. Okay, here's what happened, and I'm sorry to steal Helen's thunder since she has the same graph. But, I take it back to 64, you can go back to 47, but then you have to play a little bit with the numbers. But that's the same thing. For the period of the golden age, productivity, the blue line, output per worker, grew with wages, or wages grew with productivity. You can have to do either way, but we won't get into that. Until the 1970s. This was the tail end of the golden age. Strong labor unions, active government, relatively tight regulation of business, led to steady growth in wages, consistent with increasing output. Then, here we have a change. All of a sudden, and remember, it was all of a sudden. That's something important, because we'll come back to that. All of a sudden, things change. And since the mid-1970s, what's happened to wages? Nada. See, I can speak Spanish. Nothing. Oh, they went up and down a little bit. We had this return of the golden age from 1997 to 1998. Oh, it's great. And everybody's all excited. Unions were actually growing. Unemployment hit almost down to full employment levels. And wages actually went up, contradicting. All these economists were writing these theories of how wages could never rise. You know, I mean, economists' idea of never is usually like the last 3/4 of data from the Bureau of Statistics. But okay, anyway, since then, basically nothing's happened to wages. They've been flat. That actually is a little inaccurate. Because for the bottom half of the American labor force, wages have not been flat, they've been falling. For the top 40% of the labor force, they've gone up a little bit. For the top 10%, they've gone up enough that it keeps this line flat. But it's not flat if you're a janitor. It's not flat if you're working at a factory. It's not flat if you're working with your hands at a construction site. Your wages have been falling for 30 years. You know, so things are actually worse than this looks. Okay, even that. The golden age was unsustainable, and one lesson here is the dialectic, that whatever goes on can't go on forever, which is why I like being a historian. You recognize that things don't go on forever. Or as Herbert Stein, an economist, said, if something's unsustainable, it won't last forever. The golden age was unsustainable because coming out of the 30s and the great struggle against fascism and Nazism in the 40s, we promised, as a society, we promised justice and democracy. Capitalism cannot deliver justice and democracy. Capitalism maybe is a good system for other things, but it rests on hierarchy. It rests on workers following orders. I mean, you could say that's, you know, you can make a Hobbesian argument, you can make a Lockean argument. We can, you know, I don't mean to critique capitalism, although I don't like it. But I don't need to critique it here. That's beyond us. But certainly, the promises made by the New Deal order, in the golden age, could not be sustained. Come the 60s, with the rise of civil rights, with the campaign for feminist rights, the strange idea that women are human beings, blacks are human beings, workers are human beings. And we had this upsurge in labor militancy in the late 60s, early 70s, not just, it's most famously in places like Italy with the hot autumn of '69 and the factory occupations in Turin and places, but the same things were happening in Detroit, the same things were happening in England even, in Germany. So we had a major upsurge of labor unrest in the late 60s, which was met for a while with governments shoveling money at workers, or telling businesses to shovel money at workers. Some of you may remember none of you remember, but they read about the coal miners' strikes in '73 and '74 in Britain. How did the Labour government deal with them? Said, oh, forget it, just give them 30% wage increases. Capitalists were appalled, as well they might be. The United Kingdom, 1974, total corporate profits, negative. Throughout the Western world, the United States included, profits dropped like a stone in the late 60s, early 70s. Corporate profits, capitalist profits, the system was in danger. Then they did something about it. They are so good. They are so much smarter than us. I was around then. I was a mere pup, and I thought that, oh, the choices will be, you know, socialism or barbarism. That's a famous board game. Or I was driving out in the car with one of my mentors in graduate school. He was explaining to me how they're going to have to impose wage price controls. There's no other alternative. Well, there was another alternative. And the capitalists, unlike us, we're very good at marching on one foot. You know, like, we're really smart people. We're intellectuals, you know, on the left. Or sometimes we're good activists. We're not good at putting them together. Capitalists did that, and they did it ingeniously. And like I said, it turned on a dime. 1974, we elected the most overwhelmingly democratic liberal Congress in history. By 1976, the political dialogue had turned around. What we called tax reform was no longer increasing taxes on the rich, it was cutting taxes on capital gains. Labor law reform, which seemed like an absolute done deal, collapsed. Between 74 and 78, it all turned, and the capitalists took back command. They did it ideologically. Like I said, they walk on two legs. The Heritage Foundation, the American Enterprise Institute, the Free Economic Enterprise, I forget what it is, sorry. Business Roundtable marched into Congress and started giving orders again. Orders financed with campaign spending. Massive. They started shoveling money at the system. Of course, they had the money. That helps. You can always, as Napoleon said, God's on the side of the big battalions. Genius is on the side of big money. But that's what they did. They used their tools effectively. We don't have big money. We have to figure out something else to do. And we haven't been doing that very well. This is just, I couldn't resist this one. Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, JP Morgan, Bank of America. Whatever happened to financial reform? I mean, it should have been such an obvious, after 2007, 2008, you think that the banks should have been on the run. No, Dodd-Frank is better than nothing. We'll see whether even it survives. But here's one. Goldman Sachs, $14 million in 15, 20 years to Democrats. These guys just shovel money at the political system and they get their way. And they shovel money at defeating unions. Your chance of losing your job if you're an activist in a union organizing campaign, losing your job in the sense that it's considered an illegal firing by the National Labor Relations Board, 1 chance in 10. 1 union voter in 10 is fired illegally for supporting union. That's contributing to this steady decline in unionization. Mind you, this isn't just the United States. Everything I'm saying about the United States is happening in Europe, happening in Japan. This is a worldwide capitalist offensive, and they won. They won. They cut taxes. This top line, these are the top 100th of 1%. Let's figure out, how many is that? That's 3 million divided by 100, that's 300, that's 30,000 people. These are the richest 30,000 households. They were paying taxes back in the 60s and 70s when economic growth was high, when we had full employment, when wages were rising and productivity was jumping. They were paying over 70% of their income in taxes. They pile money into the political system and they drop their tax rate down to the 30% level, while pushing up taxes on everybody else. They're so good. I mean, this is bowled over. In historic terms. I mean, we're not talking about something that happened over, like the fall of the Roman Empire over 300 years. No, this is like, they did it in 5 years.
That's good.
Here's another graph showing the same tax data. Okay, neoliberal policy, what's the goal? The goal is to keep down wages and beat up the workers. I can say this, and it sounds a little extreme. I have a former graduate student who ended up as a corporate, as a Wall Street consultant. And he goes to some of these meetings. He says, oh, you say things like this to the capitalists, they understand, they got it. They understand class war because they've been waging it effectively for 40 years, and then they go around saying, oh, no, you got it. What's unemployment except class warfare? They keep up the unemployment rate, they bring in free trade, they bring in goods from other countries to compete with stuff made here, all to drive down wages and keep workers scared so that they'll put up so they'll be grateful for a job. Lower wages, the result is our economy has not done as well. They don't care. They've got plenty. They gain more on redistribution than they've been losing on slower economic growth. We're the ones who've been paying for slower economic growth. All these imports. We're the ones losing jobs. We're the ones losing tax revenues to fund our schools. They don't care. They've got the money. They send their kids to private school. But there is a fundamental problem here that they do run into. And this is the problem that they've had the last couple of years. And they do not have a solution. What's worse, everything they've been doing has been making it worse. The problem is, at the end of the day, somebody's got to buy what you make, or else you can't profit from it. You can only profit if you can realize your output, if you can sell your stuff. Who's going to buy it if your workers don't have enough wages to pay? So what do? Okay? You tell people to borrow to pay. This is the problem you've had in Europe. Germany can produce way more than German workers whose wages have been squeezed for 20 years. Germany can produce more. So who do they sell it to? Well, they lend money to Greece and Italy and say, you buy the stuff. That works great for a while. You got old grandma up there to dip into home equity, and she buys an extra car or a few computers, maybe 5 iPods, whatever, since she loses them all the time. So like I said, she's grandma. And that savings rate drops. Yeah. Do you know what? All the economic growth in the United States from 2004 to 2007 was financed by home equity borrowing. The value of home equity borrowing accounted for all of the increase in consumption in those years. Well, what's happened to poor Greece? One of my favorite countries, where I recommend you all go for the summer. It's going to be really cheap, I think. You see this drop? This is the drop in the U.S. employment in the months before Obama came into office, late 2008. Leveled off after that, but Greece is way worse. Greece is heading towards 20% unemployment. We're not getting there yet, but we're working on it. That's the problem. What do they do? Capitalists can't possibly spend all the money they make. The richest 1/100th of 1% average income, I think $14 million, because the savings they have on taxes is $7 million. $14 million per household for those 30,000 households? How can you spend that much? Oh, okay. I know, you can think of ways. But try doing it the next year, after you already bought that house in the Hamptons. Capitalists have increased their share of income by more than is sustainable in terms of maintaining effective demand. So, they've got a real problem. The solution is obvious. The solution is you get the government to spend the money. But they've got a problem. Remember that, neoliberal, all those think tanks, all those groups that they AstroTurf organized, the Tea Party people that they've been financing, all that stuff. Well, those people are in there saying, hey, wait, we believe in neoliberalism. We believe in the ideology. Those people are now standing in the way of what the capitalists need, which is expansive government policies of the type that the Obama administration has been talking about. They're in a real bind. But I don't know if we want to save them. It's kind of interesting seeing how these things come around, what comes around, what goes around, comes around, or something. I think Yogi Berra had something to say about that. But the real issue is, for us, things can change really quickly. I do labor history, and labor historians, labor activists love quoting this 1932 speech by the head of the American Economic Association about how the labor movement is dead. And 3 years later, he was proven completely wrong. Things change, and when they change in history, they sometimes change really quickly. 1974, everyone was talking about capitalism is dead. 4 years later, 5 years later, they were back in the saddle. Right now, people are saying the Occupy movement, doesn't matter, the left is dead, there's no alternative to austerity and the policies of neoliberalism. Well, we can prove them wrong again. Thank you.